Laika, a small stray dog from the streets of Moscow, became an unlikely heroine of one of the most daring and tragic missions in the history of human space exploration. In the cold, expansive void of space, the boundaries between science, humanity, and the animal kingdom blurred. Yet, the name Laika, though forever etched in history, remains tied to an event that is as inspiring as it is heartbreaking. Her story is one of courage, sacrifice, and the cold realities of a time when space exploration was as much a race as it was an experiment in human endurance and ambition. In the early days of the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States were locked in a fierce contest not just for political supremacy, but for technological dominance. The space race was in full swing, and the Soviet Union was determined to lead. The launch of Sputnik 1 in October 1957 marked the first man-made object to orbit Earth. This milestone was a testament to Soviet prowess in science and engineering, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in human space exploration that would forever change the relationship between man and the cosmos. Yet, at the time, human space travel was a distant goal. Before sending a human into space, Soviet scientists had to determine if a living being could survive the journey. To this end, animals were chosen as test subjects, with a particular focus on dogs, who had been used in scientific experiments for years. Strays were preferred because they were considered hardier and more adaptable, characteristics that were believed to be essential for surviving the harsh conditions of space. Laika was one of many dogs that had been trained for the Soviet space program, but her fate would be unlike any of her predecessors. She was a stray, found on the streets of Moscow, and it was said that she was chosen for her small size and calm demeanor. Laika's selection for the mission was not a coincidence. It was the result of meticulous planning by the Soviet Union's top engineers, scientists, and cosmonauts. She was no ordinary dog. She was a symbol of Soviet perseverance and ambition. The spaceflight that Laika was set to embark on was no simple mission. It was a significant milestone in the Soviet Union's push for supremacy in the Cold War space race. The spacecraft that Laika would ride in was named Sputnik 2, the second satellite to be launched into space by the Soviet Union, following the success of Sputnik 1. But while Sputnik 1 had been a triumph for Soviet science, Sputnik 2 was far more ambitious. It was designed not only to carry a living being into space, but to test how life could survive in the harsh environment of orbit. For Laika, the journey began in the confines of the cramped capsule of Sputnik 2. Inside the spacecraft, she was secured in a small compartment that had been specially designed for her. The compartment was equipped with a life support system that was meant to provide air, food, and water for the dog. There were sensors to monitor her condition, and the spacecraft itself was equipped with a variety of technological instruments designed to gather data on the effects of space travel on a living organism. Despite the seeming sophistication of the design, the reality of the mission was much less reassuring. Laika's mission was a one-way trip. While Soviet scientists were hopeful that they would be able to monitor her health during the flight, there were no plans to bring her back to Earth. The technology required for a safe return from orbit was not yet developed, and the mission's primary objective was to gather data about the biological effects of space travel on a living being. In the event of an emergency, Laika would not have been able to survive. The mission, from the very beginning, was destined to end in tragedy. Laika's launch occurred on November 3, 1957, and it marked a pivotal moment in the space race. As the rocket carrying Sputnik 2 soared into the sky, it carried with it a symbol of Soviet strength and ambition. Yet, behind the scenes, the Soviet Union's space engineers and scientists were deeply aware of the risks involved. They knew that there was a high likelihood that the mission would end in disaster, but the race to demonstrate Soviet technological superiority was far too important to back out now. And so, it was sent into the unknown, her fate sealed by the aspirations of a nation. As Sputnik 2 ascended into the stratosphere, it was subjected to the intense forces of acceleration. Inside her small capsule, she would have experienced the sharp jolts and vibrations that came with launch. Once in orbit, the reality of space travel began to set in. The temperature inside the capsule fluctuated wildly, and the lack of gravity would have made it difficult for Laika to adjust to her new environment. Yet, the data collected during the mission was invaluable. Laika's physiological responses, including her heart rate, breathing, and stress levels, were monitored throughout the flight. Despite the best efforts of the Soviet scientists, however, the mission would not have the success they had hoped for. The life support systems inside the spacecraft were not as effective as expected. Laika, who had been nervous and stressed even before the launch, began to experience severe physical distress. The temperature inside the capsule began to rise, and the conditions became unbearable. According to later reports, Laika died just a few hours into the flight, as a result of heat and stress-induced shock. It was a tragic end to a mission that had been conceived with such high hopes. While Laika's death was a devastating blow, the data collected from her mission contributed to the development of future space missions. The Soviet Union, and later other nations, would use the lessons learned from Laika's flight to improve the safety of human space travel. The mission, despite its tragic outcome, served as a stepping stone toward the eventual success of human space exploration. In many ways, Laika became a symbol of the sacrifice that would be required to break the boundaries of Earth and venture into the cosmos. Laika's story has since become a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of knowledge and progress. It is a story of a small dog, whose fate was intertwined with the ambitions of a superpower, whose short life made a profound impact on the course of history. The Soviet Union, for all its technological might, had sent a living being into space without a true understanding of the risks involved. But in the aftermath of Laika's flight, the world began to recognize that the journey into space was not just a scientific endeavor, it was a human one, marked by both triumph and tragedy. Laika's legacy lives on in the many animals and astronauts who followed her into space. Her story reminds us of the fragile line between exploration and exploitation, and of the unintended consequences of human ambition. In the years following her flight, there would be other dogs, monkeys, and even humans who would brave the unknown, but Laika's place in history remains unique. She was the first living being to orbit the Earth, and her mission paved the way for the eventual achievement of sending humans into space. The Soviet space program went on to achieve remarkable success, with Yuri Gagarin becoming the first human to orbit the Earth in 1961. Yet, despite the accomplishments that followed, the memory of Laika's flight is one that has never been forgotten. Over the years, her story has been revisited, examined, and reflected upon. Many consider Laika to be the first true martyr of the space age, a symbol of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of scientific discovery. In Moscow, a monument stands in her honor, a small, inconspicuous tribute to the dog who made history. The monument, which was erected in 2008, depicts Laika inside her spacecraft, gazing up at the stars. It serves as a reminder of her courage and her sacrifice, and of the complex, often tragic relationship between humanity and the animals it has sent into space. Laika's flight, brief as it was, remains a defining moment in the history of space exploration. Her mission was not without controversy, but it helped to shape the future of human spaceflight. She was a pioneer in the truest sense of the word, a small, unknowing creature who became part of something much larger than herself. Laika may have been the first to orbit the Earth, but she was by no means the last, and her legacy continues to inspire those who look up to the stars and dream of what lies beyond. In the cold, empty expanse of space, Laika's journey was brief, but her impact was lasting, and in the quiet solitude of the cosmos, her story will forever echo, a testament to the cost of exploration and the courage it takes to venture into the unknown. Laika may have been alone in space, but she was never alone in history. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing content. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos.